My brother stole my savings to help his girlfriend. And when everything went wrong, he blamed me. So, I decided to leave home and show them how difficult it is to live without me. I'm 27 years old. And for years, I was the pillar of my family. Life changed radically when I was 18. My dad, Jack, died of a heart attack while driving his truck near the border between New Mexico and Texas. It was sudden and unexpected. One day, he was working as always. And the next, we were at a funeral. My mom, Juliet, didn't know how to handle the situation. She had been a homemaker all her life. And suddenly, she had to face debts, legal paperwork, and an uncertain future. At that time, there was also my younger brother, Ian, who was 16. Since forever, he was the spoiled one of the house. Mom always said it was because he was the youngest. But that meant that I often ended up taking on more responsibilities. When Dad died, that dynamic became even more evident. There were no savings. And the life insurance barely covered the funeral and some urgent bills. We started receiving notices from the bank about the house mortgage. And that's when I understood that I had to act quickly. I decided to put my dreams on hold. My plan was to go to university in Austin. But instead, I accepted a part-time job as a barista in a local coffee shop. Soon, I added a second job in a warehouse. I worked long hours to make sure Mom and Ian had what they needed. At first, it comforted me to think that I was doing the right thing for my family. But over time, I started to notice something that bothered me deeply. While I sacrificed everything, Mom and Ian didn't seem to understand the effort I was making. Mom always found a way to justify Ian. If he didn't wash the dishes, it was because he was still processing Dad's death. If he didn't help around the house, it was because boys his age need time to find themselves. Meanwhile, I barely slept. And I used every penny I earned to pay bills, buy food, and prevent the bank from evicting us. Things started to go from bad to worse when Ian turned 18 and met Chloe, his first serious girlfriend. Chloe was, how to put it, problematic. She was the type of girl who always had big plans but never carried them out. She had thousands of followers on Instagram and dreamed of being an influencer. At first, she seemed nice. But soon, it became evident that she was only looking to take advantage of Ian. He, of course, was completely blinded. Shortly after starting to date Chloe, Ian started asking for money more often. First, it was small things, like, I need it for a gift or I'm going to take her to dinner, but then they started to be larger amounts. Once, he asked me for $1,000 because his car needed urgent repairs. Later, I found out that it wasn't even his car. It was Chloe's. And what they fixed wasn't essential, but her air conditioning. I tried talking to Mom about this, but she always defended Ian. He's young. Liam, let him live a little. You already had your youth, she would say. That phrase hurt me more than she understood. My youth? When exactly had I enjoyed my youth? Since Dad died, I had worked tirelessly to support them all. I had no time or money to go out, travel, or even think about a different future. My whole world revolved around making sure that we didn't lose the house and that Mom and Ian were okay. The real disaster happened 6 months ago. For almost a year, I had been saving to buy myself a used car. My work was more than an hour away by public transport. And having a car would change my life. I could work more shifts, save time and energy, and finally start to feel like I was making progress. I already had almost $5,000 saved in my savings account and was about to find a good car. One day, I came home after a particularly exhausting shift and noticed something strange. Mom and Ian were quieter than usual. I went to my room, and out of curiosity, I checked my bank account. The balance hit me like a bucket of cold water. There was $2 left. All my savings had disappeared. I ran downstairs to confront Mom and Ian. At first, Mom tried to dodge my questions. But when I insisted, she finally confessed. They had used my savings to pay for a fine for Chloe. It turns out that she had been arrested for driving without a license. And Ian, desperate, promised her that he would get her out of jail. Mom helped him withdraw the money because it was the right thing to do. They didn't even consult me. I was so furious that I couldn't speak. I looked at Ian, hoping that he would at least apologize. But the only thing he said was, "Liam, it's just money. You can get it back. Chloe needed it. What did you expect me to do?" At that moment, something inside me broke. I went upstairs, feeling completely empty. My bank account had been emptied. My trust in my family shattered. And now I was trapped in a situation that felt like a cage. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the figure in my bank account, $2. Months of sacrifices and hard work all gone in the blink of an eye because Ian couldn't tell Chloe to face the consequences of her own actions. The next morning, after a sleepless night, I went downstairs determined to talk to Mom and Ian. They were in the kitchen, acting as if nothing had happened. Mom was making coffee, while Ian was checking his phone, probably looking at Chloe's latest posts on Instagram. I sat down in front of them and put my hands on the table so they would know I wasn't playing around. "I want you to explain to me how the hell you could do this to me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, although I felt like I was about to explode. Mom sighed, as if she were tired of my attitude. "Liam, I know you're upset. But understand. Chloe was in a very complicated situation. We couldn't leave her in jail. What would people say about Ian if his girlfriend was marked by this?" Ian looked up from his phone with an expression of boredom. "It's no big deal. Bro. I'll pay you back the money eventually. Just give me time." That last sentence ignited me. I stood up so fast that the chair fell behind me. "Eventually? Are you kidding me? Ian? You haven't worked a single day since Chloe appeared. You don't even pay for your own things. I cover everything. And now you stole my savings to help someone who doesn't even care about you." Ian shrugged. "Chloe loves me. Liam. You don't understand because you've never been in a relationship like ours." I wanted to scream at him. But instead, I looked at Mom, hoping that at least she would intervene, that she would take my side for once. But she didn't. Instead, she approached and put a hand on my arm, as if trying to calm me down. "Liam, I know this is difficult for you. But you have to understand that Ian is going through a lot. You're stronger. Son. You can handle these things better than him." That was the last straw. That excuse. That constant minimization of my sacrifices and efforts. Stronger? Because I always had to be the strong one? Because my life always had to be in the background while everyone else lived as they wanted? I went upstairs, slammed my bedroom door, and sat on the edge of the bed with my head in my hands. I needed to do something. I couldn't keep going like this. But at the same time, the idea of leaving Mom and Ian alone filled me with guilt. I had spent so many years taking care of them that I didn't know what my life would be like if they weren't in it. But I also knew that if I didn't do something soon, I would break. Over the following weeks, I tried to act as if everything were okay. I kept working, saving what little I could, and avoiding any interaction with Ian and Mom beyond what was absolutely necessary. However, my resentment grew every day. Ian kept asking me for money, although now he did it more indirectly, saying things like, "It would be great if we could order some food. But I don't have cash." Or, "Chloe needs help with her car again." Mom, on the other hand, tried to get me to forgive and forget, saying that we all make mistakes. One day, when I returned from work, I found Ian and Chloe in the living room watching television as if nothing were wrong. Ian was lounging on the sofa, and Chloe was wearing one of Mom's pajamas. It was as if she had decided to move into our house without consulting anyone. "What is she doing here?" I asked, crossing my arms. Ian barely turned his head to look at me. Chloe had a problem with her parents. So she'll be here for a while. I looked at Mom, hoping that she would say something that would at least set a limit. But she just shrugged. It's not forever, Liam. Besides, we have space. I felt a knot in my stomach. My own house no longer felt like mine. It was as if everything I had built, everything I had worked for, was falling apart before my eyes. That night, after hours of reflection, I made a decision. I could no longer live like this. No matter how much I loved them, Mom and Ian wouldn't change. They would always find a way to justify their behavior, to take advantage of me. I was sinking, trying to save them. But they didn't even want to save themselves. I decided that I would leave. I would start looking for a place for myself. A space where I could be free. Where I wouldn't have to be the support for anyone but myself. That decision gave me a strange sense of relief. As if I could finally see a way out. But before I left, I wanted to make it clear to them what they had lost by treating me that way. I wouldn't just leave. I would take with me everything I had bought. Everything that made our house function. If they wanted to continue living as they did, they would have to learn what it meant to live without me. Making the decision to leave was easy. Carrying it out was not so much. I had spent so many years supporting my family that, in some ways, it was almost as if part of my identity was tied to that role. But I knew that if I wanted to get my life back, I had to be firm. That night, while Ian and Chloe were watching a movie in the living room, and Mom was in her room, I made a mental list of everything I had bought with my money over the years: appliances, furniture, kitchen utensils, even some decorative items. All of that was mine, and I would take it with me. The next day, I began to plan. I needed a place to go. Fortunately, I had a close friend, Matteo, who had always supported me. I called him and told him everything. From how Mom and Ian had used my savings to how Chloe had practically moved into our house without any notice. Matteo wasn't surprised. He had heard fragments of my complaints in the past. But now that he knew the whole story, he was indignant. Liam, I always told you that your family was using you. It's time for you to do something for yourself. You can stay on my couch for as long as you need while you find your own place, he told me. His offer was a relief. Knowing that I had a safe place to land gave me the confidence to start acting. But I didn't want my departure to be abrupt or give them the opportunity to manipulate me into staying. I had to do it in a calculated way. Over the following weeks, I began to pack my things little by little. Every night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I would put something in a box: my books, my clothes, my important documents. I didn't want to raise suspicion. So I kept the boxes hidden in my room, under the bed, or in the closet. I also started to disconnect things that I knew I would take: the coffee maker that we used every morning, the toaster, even the microwave that I had bought a few years ago when the old one broke down. While I was doing this, I also observed my family. Ian continued to behave as if everything were okay, spending the little money he earned on ridiculous things like video games or expensive dinners with Chloe. Mom, for her part, continued to try to mediate between us, although she never took my side in any significant way. Chloe, of course, acted as if the house belonged to her, moving things around as she pleased and using the resources as if they were unlimited. Each of these things reinforced my decision to leave. A few days before my planned departure, something happened that almost made me explode. I arrived home after a long shift at work and found the living room completely transformed. Chloe had decided to redecorate. She had moved the furniture, thrown away some things that she said were no longer useful, and filled the space with candles and cushions of her own style. Among the things she had thrown away were a watch that I had bought and a lamp that my dad had had since before he married Mom. "What the hell is this?" I asked, walking in with accelerated breathing. Chloe was sitting on the sofa, painting her nails, and barely looked up. "Oh, Liam. We needed a change. The living room was so boring. Now it looks much better." Don't you think? Ian appeared from the kitchen with a beer in his hand. Relax. Bro, Chloe is just trying to improve things. It's not a big deal. I stared at him. Incredulous. Improve things? You threw away things that had sentimental value to me. It's not even your house. Chloe rolled her eyes and continued painting her nails. Please. Liam. It's just an old watch. It didn't even work well. I wanted to scream. But instead, I took a deep breath and went up to my room. At that moment, I knew that I couldn't wait any longer. My initial plan was to stay one more week to pack everything carefully. But that was no longer possible. I had to get out of there as soon as possible. That same night, I called Matteo and explained the situation to him. He told me that I could move in the next day. Fortunately, I had almost everything ready. I spent the rest of the night packing the last things and disconnecting the appliances that I would take. I made a mental list of everything I planned to take: the coffee maker, the microwave, the vacuum cleaner, the kitchen utensils, and everything else I had bought to make the house functional. I also decided to take the television. I had bought it for the family. But if they didn't value my efforts, they didn't deserve to enjoy it. The next morning, while Mom was at the supermarket and Ian had gone out with Chloe, I called a moving service. The movers arrived in less than an hour and helped me load everything into the truck. They barely left any empty space. I left the house with the essentials for them: an old mattress, a couple of chairs, and some dishes. Everything else was in the truck. Before I left a note on the kitchen table. It was simple and direct. I have carried this family for years, sacrificing everything while you took what you wanted without thinking about the consequences. Today, I decided to put myself first. The days when I did everything for you are over. I wish you luck. Because you're going to need it. I got into the truck with a mix of relief and nervousness. It was the first time in a long time that I had done something exclusively for myself. As the truck drove away from the house, I promised myself that I would never let anyone use me like that again. As the moving truck drove away from the house, I felt a mix of emotions that I didn't know how to process. I had spent so much time sacrificing myself that it was difficult for me to imagine what it would be like to live without that constant burden on my shoulders. On one hand, I felt free. On the other, I couldn't avoid a small knot of guilt in my stomach. But I knew that this decision was necessary not only for me, but for my family to finally learn to value everything I had done for them. I arrived at Matteo's apartment that same afternoon. He greeted me with a smile and a pizza. Something simple but comforting. He helped me unload the boxes and the most essential furniture. We had decided that I would store the larger things in a storage unit while I found my own place. But for now, his couch would be my refuge. That night, while we ate pizza and watched a football game on television, I felt lighter than ever. I didn't have to worry about paying other people's bills. I didn't have to endure Ian's absurd demands or Mom's complacency. For the first time in years, I was the owner of my time, my money, and my decisions. The first call from Mom came the next day. I didn't answer. I knew exactly what she was going to say, a combination of pleas and emotional manipulation to make me come back. After several failed attempts, she left a voice message. Her tone oscillated between anger and desperation. Liam, what the hell have you done? The house is empty. How do you expect us to live without the things you took? Call me immediately. I didn't answer. I knew that if I did, it would only end in a pointless argument. Ian also tried to reach me, but his message was much shorter and less formal. What's up, bro? You can't just leave us like that. This is ridiculous. I ignored him too. Over the following days, the calls and messages continued. Mom tried to appeal to my sense of responsibility, reminding me how much she had done for me when I was a child. Ian, on the other hand, alternated between insults and pleas. Even Chloe left a sarcastic message, saying that she hoped I was enjoying my selfish life. None of them seemed to understand that this was not an impulsive decision. It was the result of years of emotional abuse and neglect. While they dealt with their new reality, I began to rebuild mine. On my first weekend away from home, I looked for apartments in the city. I found one small but comfortable in a decent neighborhood. And although the rent was a bit high, I knew that I could afford it now that I didn't have to support 3 other people. I signed the contract that same day and began to plan my move. Matteo helped me with the boxes. And in less than 2 weeks, I was installed in my new home. That first night in my apartment was strange. There was no background noise. No one asking me for money or favors. It was just me, sitting on my small sofa, watching television while eating instant ramen. For the first time in a long time, I felt a peace that I had almost forgotten existed. While I was thriving, things at home were not going so well. According to what a neighbor told me, Ian had tried to call other relatives to ask for money, but no one was willing to help him. Chloe, apparently, had decided to move back in with her parents after realizing that living in an empty house wasn't as glamorous as she expected. Mom, for her part, was forced to look for a job to cover basic expenses. According to what I was told, she had gotten a position as a cashier in a nearby supermarket. Something she would never have considered if I were still there to support her. I couldn't help but feel a certain satisfaction knowing that they were finally facing the consequences of their actions. I wasn't a negative person, but after years of carrying everything, it was gratifying to see that, at least for once, they had to deal with reality on their own. One day, while coming back from work, I received a text message from Mom. It was different from the previous ones. Instead of blaming me or demanding something, she seemed more humble. Liam, I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I want you to know that I am very sorry for how I handled things. I shouldn't have put you in that position for so many years. If you ever decide to talk to me, I'll be here. I love you. I felt torn. Part of me wanted to respond, to give her an opportunity to fix things. But another part knew that even if her words were sincere, they couldn't erase years of emotional abuse. I decided not to respond for now. I needed more time to process what this apology really meant. Meanwhile, Ian hadn't changed in the slightest. I found out that he had started selling things from the house to get money. Even some of the few valuables that were left. When Mom found out, they had a big fight that ended with Ian leaving the house and moving in with a friend. According to my neighbor, Mom was devastated. But I knew that it was only a matter of time before he tried to come back. Despite everything, I didn't feel resentment towards them. Rather, I felt a strange mix of pity and relief. Pity because I knew that if they had handled things differently, we could all have had a much better life. But relief because I was finally out of that toxic dynamic, building something of my own. After almost a month without responding to calls or messages from my family, I began to feel a calm that I hadn't experienced in years. However, the silence also led me to reflect. Was it enough to cut ties and move on? Or was there something else I had to do to close this chapter of my life? One day, while coming back from work, I received an unexpected message from an unknown number. I hesitated to open it, but finally I did. It was from Mom. Liam, I'm sorry for continuing to insist, but I need you to know that Ian has left the house. He sold Dad's television without telling me. I'm working every day, but I feel exhausted. I'm not asking you for money. I just wanted to tell you that I'm sorry for everything. I know you probably don't want to hear me, but I'm trying to change. This time, I didn't ignore it. I sat on the sofa of my small apartment and let the words sink in. Part of me wanted to leave everything behind, but another part knew that I couldn't move on completely without confronting this situation. I decided to call. When Mom answered, her voice was a mix of relief and fear. Liam, thank you for calling me. I didn't expect you to do it, she said, holding back tears. I'm not calling to come back. Mom, I want that to be clear from the beginning. I responded firmly. But I needed to tell you some things. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Mom sighed. I understand. Tell me what you need to say. I explained to her how I had felt all those years. Invisible. Used. And carrying a weight that wasn't mine to bear. I reminded her of all the times she had ignored my needs in favor of Ian's, justifying him with excuses that were never valid. I told her how in the end, I realized that I would never be valued as long as I remained in that house. Mom cried during much of the conversation. She told me that she never realized how much everything was affecting me because she was too focused on keeping peace in the family. She apologized again and again. And although I felt that her words were sincere, I also knew that the wound she had left in me wouldn't heal so easily. After that call, things calmed down. I didn't receive any more insistent messages or calls. Mom respected my decision to keep my distance. I learned through a neighbor that Ian had returned home briefly, only to leave again after another fight with Mom. Chloe hadn't reappeared. And apparently, Mom was managing the house on her own. I, for my part, was thriving. My small apartment began to feel like a home. I decided to paint the walls in warm colors, bought some plants, and decorated with things that I really liked. Every corner was a reflection of me, of my new beginning. Also, I finally managed to buy the car I had dreamed of. It was nothing luxurious, but it was mine. And every time I got behind the wheel, I felt like I had recovered something I thought was lost, my independence. At work, things also improved. Without the constant stress of my family, I was able to focus more. And that led me to get a promotion. Now I had a higher salary and more manageable hours, which even allowed me to start taking night classes in graphic design, something I had always wanted to study. A few months later, I received one last update about Ian. A distant cousin wrote me to tell me that Ian had gotten into legal trouble again. This time for scamming some friends in a cryptocurrency business. He had been arrested, but Mom wasn't willing to pay his bail. I felt a mix of sadness and relief. Ian had had so many opportunities to change, but he never took them. Perhaps he would finally face the consequences of his actions. On the other hand, Mom seemed to be finding her way. Although she didn't have the easy life she had had while I was there to support her, she was learning to be self-sufficient. She had been promoted to a supervisory position at the supermarket. And according to the neighbor, she had even started attending emotional support meetings for parents. I was happy for her, although I wasn't ready to resume a close relationship.